Hi, I'm Delta Picmello, and welcome to Museum Mondays at the Sacramento History Museum. Now, today is the last Monday of the month, so you know what that means. Story time. Now, normally I like to tell stories because, well, I read so many wonderful stories and I read them over and over that sometimes I can just memorize them, and I like to tell the stories, and then you get to see the pictures in your own mind. But every once in a while, I want to read a book because the pictures are so good. So this is one time that we're going to read a book, and the book is called You Forgot Your Skirt, Amelia Bloomer. It's by Shana Corey and illustrated by Chelsea McLaren. Now, before I start this story, imagine a time when women were not supposed to wear pants. They were not allowed to. It was not right. It was not proper. And this is a story about that 150 years ago. Amelia Bloomer was not a proper lady. In fact, Amelia Bloomer thought proper ladies were silly. She thought it was silly that proper ladies were not allowed to vote. So she tried to change the laws so that they could. Good grief, the people said. Amelia Bloomer thought it was silly that proper ladies were not supposed to work. So she started her own newspaper and she went to work. Just like that. She named the newspaper The Lily, and it was a special newspaper all about women. And she hired other women to work on it too. A shame, people said. But the silliest thing of all, thought Amelia Bloomer, was the way that proper ladies were supposed to dress. Their dresses were so heavy that it was like carrying around a dozen bricks. What was proper about that? And their dresses were so long that proper ladies looked like walking broomsticks. And they acted like broomsticks too, because their skirts would sweep up all the mud and the trash from the streets. Now, what was proper about that? And their corsets were so tight that they wore underneath their dresses. It was hard to breathe, and proper ladies were fainting all over town at the drop of a hat. Now, what was proper about that? Oh, and the hoops they wore under their skirts were so wide that no matter how they squeezed, no matter how they squished and squashed and stuffed themselves through, proper ladies were getting stuck in doorways all over town. What in the world was proper about that? Even little girls had to wear proper dresses so they couldn't jump or run or play. This has got to stop, said Amelia Bloomer. Then, one day, Amelia's friend, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, came to visit, and Elizabeth brought her cousin Libby with her. Libby looked remarkable. She was even more improper than Amelia because Libby was wearing a dress. She was not wearing a dress. Dresses, said Libby. Bah, how silly. Instead of a dress, Libby was wearing something that was not too heavy and not too long and not too tight and not too wide. It looked just right. Brilliant, announced Amelia. My, look at that. And she went right to work on her sewing machine and she sewed a matching suit just for herself. Then she went out for a walk. Oh, the townspeople were aghast. Can you believe it? You forgot your skirt, Amelia Bloomer, said a little boy. Shocking, others said. But Amelia didn't care. She thought the new clothes were wonderful. She ran and she jumped and she twirled and she did all the things she always wanted to do. Amelia had such a good time that she wanted other women to know about the new clothes too. So when she got home, she wrote all about it in her newspaper. Marvelous, said a woman in Boston. Oh, I declare, said a lady from Charleston. Where can I get one? Asked a lady from Baltimore. And pretty soon Amelia had letters from women everywhere, and they all wanted patterns so that they could make the new clothes themselves. Some of them even wanted some tips on how to wear the new outfit. Some people called the new style of clothes the American costume. Most people just called them bloomers. Of course, not everyone was very happy with the bloomers, said one very proper gentleman. Balderdash, said another. This can only lead to more rights for women, grumbled a third. Well, over time, bloomers eventually went out of style. Proper ladies and gentlemen everywhere breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness, they said. Now everyone will forget this nonsense and things can return to normal. But did people really forget all about Amelia Bloomer and her improper ideas? Well, what do you think? Now, I can't imagine if I couldn't wear pants. That would make me very unhappy. But after I read that story, I thought of all kinds of other stories that I have about some famous girls and women. And I thought I would share some of them with you so that you can go to the library, hopefully very soon, or the bookstore, and find these stories and read them for yourself. The first one is Mary Walker. Mary Walker wears the pants. Now, Mary Walker is a true story about a woman who became a doctor when women were not supposed to be doctors. And she liked the bloomer outfit and she wore it. And then finally she decided, I'm just going to wear pants and a suit. And she wore it for the rest of her life. She was the first woman to receive, the only woman so far to receive the Presidential Medal of Honor. Another great story is Fearless Mary. Mary was a stagecoach driver. Again, it was a time when women were not supposed to be stagecoach drivers, and she was brave and daring and very good at her job. This is a story, Alice Ramsey's Grand Adventure. Alice Ramsey in the early 1900s was the first woman to drive across the United States in a car all by herself. Now, this was a time where there weren't very good roads. Sometimes there was no road at all. But she drove all the way across from New York to San Francisco in 59 days. And this is the story of Madam C.J. Walker. Now, Madam C.J. Walker was the name of her product, and it was wonderful. She was the first African American to become a millionaire, selling and making and selling her own product line. She was an inventor, industrious, very smart, and she liked to drive a car too. She drove an electric car 100 years ago when electric cars were brand new. I bet you didn't even know that. And she loved to drive her car around town. It made her very independent. Here comes the Girl Scouts. This is the story of Juliette Gordon Low. Now, she knew that there was an organization called Boy Scouts, but she thought there should be an organization called Girl Scouts, and she created it. She loved the outdoors, and she loved the adventure, and she wanted other little girls to enjoy the same. And this story, Fly High, is the story of Bessie Coleman. Bessie Coleman was the first African American to get her pilot's license. She loved to fly, and she got to do it again 100 years ago when planes were brand new. Now this story, True Heart, is a little different. There was a time when women weren't supposed to work and wear overalls and work on trains and other things, but they needed them in the early part of the 1900s and during World War I. And women weren't supposed to be engineers, but this is a story of a woman that dreamed of being an engineer and got her chance one day. And finally, this one is a story of a woman who loved animals, and when she was 10 years old, she decided she wanted to go to Africa, and she wanted to live with animals, and she wanted to learn all about them. And her name is Jane Goodall, and she did just that. And she goes around the world now and telling everybody about animals and how important they are and how we must save them and protect them, and she is still doing that even today. So, those are just a few stories that I happen to like. I hope you've had a good time with story time. We'll see you next month where we're going to talk about the secrets of the underground. And at the end of the month, I'll have another story time for you. Thanks.